Okay, so we want to talk about what happens between the time that candidates write the certification exam up until they get the results. So I'm talking to Denise Nuttall, the Director of Certification and Prior Learning Assessment here at CSMLS. So Denise, can you explain to me what's the first thing that happens after students have completed their exam? What happens to all that information?
So the candidate result file is sent over to us by Prometric. It's called it's FTP'd, what is called FTP'd over to us. And it happens generally within 3 hours of the candidate finishing their exam. And it can take up to 3 days for us to receive all files. Once they have been received, staff will be doing quality checks, quality control on them, just like in a lab, you would always do quality control on your test results. So we're doing quality control on our candidates' test results. We also, at the same time, while we're compiling all those results properly, we're investigating any complaints that were made by the candidates or any questions they were asking about items on the exam. And we will also we'll also investigate anything that the proctors, whether it was remote proctoring or in-person proctored, they give us non-conformance reports, just like you would in a lab. If something doesn't go properly, we check all the non-conformance reports that are generated and we investigate further.
Okay, so along with gathering all of the information, and we're talking like across Canada, right? So there are hundreds of tests happening all at the same time across Canada. So all of that information has to come in. And then, of course, just making sure that everything went right on exam day. So that's kind of the first step.
Yeah.
And then what happens next?
The next step for us would be, once we have all of our quality checks done, we would send all the data to a statistician, but this statistician is called a psychometrician. The psychometrician doesn't just perform statistics, but they also psychologically analyze the test taker performance.
Okay, and what would be the value of having them look at the way that candidates answered a certain way?
So this allows both the psychometrician and the subject matter experts who are on the exam panel, who review everything together, understanding as to how or why a question might be answered by this cohort. And at that point, the exam panel with a psychometrician discuss it and may decide whether or not to zero mark that question, whether or not to take that question back to the exam panel to rework for the next iteration of an exam, or both, or leave it as is because it's a good question and, you know, we're not sure why this cohort performed either poorly or better than previous cohorts on an item that may have been used before.
So I'm getting the sense that you're not just looking at, you know, how well the candidates performed, but also the quality of the test themselves, like the actual questions. So you continue to analyze and decide whether they're performing the way that they should or not.
Yeah, just like in the lab, CQI, continuous quality improvement, we are looking at everything. The exam will always be looked at in conjunction with how the test takers themselves have performed.
And then what happens after that analysis then, once you've looked at the actual questions themselves?
So after we've consulted with the exam panel and they have made the decision on which items to either remove from marking, rescore for us, once that's all decided, the psychometrician gives us a report and we go ahead and rescore the exam with zero marked questions, if there are any. And then at that point, we start doing even more quality checks again on all the items to make sure that they are all correct and that there will be, if any were zero marked, that there will be differences between the original mark and the secondary mark.
So when you say zero mark, you mean that that question now, doesn't matter if someone answered it correctly or incorrectly, it now does not count towards the final mark.
It would be removed from the exam, and the total number of questions that's being marked out is reduced by that many.
Right. It changes the whole exam itself.
It changes the whole exam for everyone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Once all of that analysis is then done, are these considered final results and the students can see how well they did?
Well, they're considered final results, but we still have to upload them to the database where they then become external facing so that the candidates can log in and get the results. So we're doing quality checks on that also. So once those quality checks are done, the candidate results will be released to them in a blast email that gets sent out to those that were registered and actually took the exam.
And is there anyone else that gets to see these results other than just the candidates?
Yes, actually. So the same day, like within an hour, generally, once the candidate results are released to the candidates, we also release the results in a different manner to the regulators across the country. They will be apprised of the candidates who failed and passed anywhere in the country, so that if a candidate comes to their program, or sorry, to their province to work, they already know about them, or if they have a transitional license that some of the provinces allow, they know who will now transfer into certified and who then may have to rewrite.
So it's pretty important that those results are accurate at that point, because that's people who are entering into the workforce.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so the regulators know, and now the students know, and is there anywhere else that these results end up?
Yeah, well, in a manner of speaking, generally 2 to 3 weeks post-exam results release, we send out program performance reports too. Now, these are similar to a student performance on their exam if they've not been able to pass it. We send out bar charts and other documents to the programs to show how well that cohort did. It's never individualized, it's anonymized. So it would be like if one program had 25 candidates come, it would tell them how many passed, how many failed from that program. It would then compare it to how many passed and how many failed across Canada and in their province if there's more than one program in their province that writes that session. That is then also shared with the regulators. And if it's below a performance level, it will also be shared with the accreditation body that accredits their program. So that's Accreditation Canada.
And again, that's all part of those checks and balances, right? So
Yes.
A program needs to know how well their program is working in order to get candidates to pass the exam and get into the workforce. And I assume the same thing that Accreditation Canada would also need to know how well those programs are performing. It's better to have the correct results right away and not worry about anything happening weeks later. And I think there's that sense of confidence. Obviously, these steps are in place to have confidence in the exam, and therefore the confidence in the results and the quality of new professionals entering into the workforce.
Yeah, I mean, our handbook states within 5 to 7 weeks, so up to 49 days. But most of our information states within 45 days, and we're generally well below that. So we really push to have it ready for 35 days out, but we have this window where if something's gone on, we have to do further quality checks. We have to pull data specifically from the vendor. Then we have that extra 10 days to play with.
Well, thanks, Denise. I really appreciate you kind of walking us through everything that happens. There's a lot of moving parts, but we all know, the importance of quality control and also just that confidence in the integrity of the exam. And like you said, having great quality medical laboratory professionals out in the field working.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.